The highway stretched out before me like a black snake, winding its way through the deserted countryside. I had been driving for hours, and the GPS insisted I was getting close to my destination. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, I began to feel a creeping sense of unease. The trees seemed to close in around me, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to snatch at my car. I shivered, despite the sweltering summer heat, and turned up the radio to distract myself from the ominous atmosphere. The music began to fade in and out, static-filled broadcasts from distant stations bleeding into the main channel. I fiddled with the dials, trying to find a clearer signal, but it seemed the further I drove, the more interference I encountered. Suddenly, the radio went dead altogether. I groaned in frustration and slapped the dashboard. The car's headlights cast an eerie glow on the road ahead, illuminating the sign that read, Ravens Peak, 5 miles. I accelerated, eager to reach my destination and get some rest. But as I rounded a bend, my tires screeched in protest. A figure stood in the middle of the road, shrouded in shadows. My heart racing, I slammed on the brakes, and the car skidded to a stop mere inches from the figure. I stared, frozen in terror, as the figure slowly raised its head. Our eyes met, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The figure didn't move or speak, it simply stood there, its gaze fixed on me. Slowly, the figure stepped aside, revealing a worn dirt path that branched off the main road. A chill ran down my spine as I realized the figure was pointing me toward Ravens Peak. I hesitated, wondering if I should trust this mysterious apparition. But something about its calm demeanor put me at ease, and I cautiously turned the car onto the dirt path. The trees seemed to close in around me once more, casting long, ominous shadows on the ground. The car's headlights bounced along the rough terrain, illuminating overgrown bushes and twisted tree roots. I winced as branches scraped against the car's paint job, but I pressed on, driven by curiosity. As I rounded a bend, the trees parted, revealing a dilapidated mansion in the distance. The windows were boarded up, and the door hung crookedly on its hinges. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized this must be my destination. I parked the car and stepped out, stretching my stiff muscles. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the distant hooting of owls. I approached the mansion, my footsteps echoing off the walls. The front door creaked ominously as I pushed it open. Stepping inside, I called out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" My voice echoed off the walls, but there was no response. I fumbled in my pocket for a flashlight and turned it on, casting a weak beam of light into the darkness. The air inside was thick with dust and the stench of decay. I covered my mouth and nose, trying to filter out the worst of it. As I moved deeper into the mansion, I stumbled upon a room that seemed untouched by time. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. The footsteps grew louder, heavier, and I felt a presence closing in around me. That's when I saw the figure again, standing just beyond the edge of the firelight. This time, it spoke. "Welcome to Ravens Peak," it said, its voice low and gravelly. "You've been expected." I tried to respond, but my voice caught in my throat. The figure began to move closer, its eyes fixed on me with an unnerving intensity. As it stepped into the firelight, I saw its face clearly for the first time. It was ancient, with skin like worn leather and eyes that seemed to hold a deep sadness. "Who are you?" I managed to stammer. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it reached out a bony hand and grasped my shoulder. I felt a jolt of electricity run through my body, and suddenly, visions began to flash before my eyes. I saw the mansion in its former glory, filled with laughter and music. I saw the figure, young and vibrant, dancing with a woman in a white gown. The visions faded, leaving me shaken. The figure released my shoulder, and I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet. As I fell, the world went dark. When I came to, I was lying on a dusty bed, my head throbbing with pain. The figure stood over me, its eyes filled with a deep concern. "You're safe now," it said, its voice softer than before. "But you shouldn't have come here. This place has a way of holding on to its secrets, and its souls." I tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness washed over me, forcing me back onto the bed. The figure watched me, its expression unreadable. As I lay there, I realized that I might never leave Raven's Peak. The thought sent a chill down my spine, and I knew I had to escape, no matter what horrors lay ahead. As I regained my strength, I noticed the figure's eyes seemed to bore into my very soul, as if searching for something. I tried to sit up again, and this time, I managed to stay upright. The figure handed me a glass of water, and I took it hesitantly. "Drink," it said, its voice still low and gravelly. "You need to rest." I sipped the water, feeling a strange, calming effect wash over me. The figure sat down beside me, its movements eerily silent. "Who are you?" I asked again, trying to keep my voice steady. The figure didn't respond directly. Instead, it began to speak of Raven's Peak's history, of the family that once lived here, and the tragedy that befell them. As it spoke, the room seemed to fade away, and I saw visions of the past, children playing, laughter echoing, and a family's joy, but beneath the surface, I sensed a darkness, a malevolent force that had driven the family apart. The figure's words hinted at a terrible secret, one that had haunted Raven's Peak for generations. As the night wore on, I grew more and more uneasy. The figure's words seemed to weave a spell around me, drawing me deeper into the mansion's dark history. I knew I had to escape, but my body felt heavy, as if rooted to the spot. Suddenly, the fire went out, plunging the room into darkness. The figure vanished, leaving me alone. I heard whispers, faint at first, but growing louder. The whispers seemed to come from all around me, echoing off the walls. I stumbled out of the room, desperate to find a way out. But the mansion seemed to shift and twist around me, corridors leading to dead ends, and doors opening into empty rooms. I was trapped, lost in a labyrinth of horrors, and then, I saw her. A woman in a white gown, her eyes black as coal, her skin deathly pale. She drifted toward me, her presence filling the room with an unspeakable sadness. "Welcome to Raven's Peak," she whispered, her voice like a sigh on the wind. "You'll never leave." The woman's eyes seemed to bore into my soul, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I tried to step back, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. She drifted closer, her presence filling the room with an unspeakable sadness. "Who are you?" I managed to stammer. The woman didn't respond. Instead, she reached out a hand and touched my face. Her touch was icy cold, and I felt a wave of memories flood my mind. I saw the mansion in its former glory, filled with laughter and music. I saw the family that once lived here, happy and carefree, but beneath the surface, I sensed a darkness, a malevolent force that had driven the family apart. I saw the woman, young and vibrant, her eyes shining with love and laughter. And I saw her death, a tragic and senseless loss that had shattered the family's world. The visions faded, leaving me shaken. The woman's eyes seemed to hold a deep sorrow, and I felt a pang of compassion. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." The woman's gaze lingered on mine, and for a moment, I thought I saw a glimmer of understanding. Then, she vanished, leaving me alone in the darkness. I stumbled forward, trying to find my way out of the mansion. But the corridors seemed to shift and twist around me, leading me deeper into the heart of the house. I heard footsteps behind me, heavy and deliberate. The figure in shadows was coming for me. Suddenly, I saw a glimmer of light ahead. I stumbled toward it, hoping to find a way out. But as I reached the door, I realized it wasn't a way out at all. It was a room, filled with old photographs and dusty antiques. In the center of the room, I saw a single photograph. It was an old picture, yellowed with age. But as I looked closer, I realized it was a picture of me. I was standing in front of the mansion, my car parked behind me. I felt a chill run down my spine. How was this possible? I had never been to Raven's Peak before. And yet, the photograph seemed to show that I had been here before. As I stared at the photograph, the room began to fade away. I felt myself being pulled back into the past, into the heart of the mansion's dark history. I felt a strange sensation, as if I was being pulled apart and put back together again. When my vision cleared, I found myself standing in the same room, but everything looked different. The furniture was newer, the walls were painted a different color, and the windows were open, letting in a warm breeze that I looked down at myself and saw that I was dressed in clothes from another era. A young woman, dressed in a long skirt and blouse, approached me, smiling. "Welcome home," she said, her eyes shining with happiness. "I've been waiting for you." I realized, with a start, that this must be the woman in white I had seen earlier. But why was she so happy, and why did she seem to know me? As the day went on, I found myself caught up in a whirlwind of activity. The woman, whose name was Elizabeth, took me on a tour of the mansion, introducing me to her family and friends. I felt like I was living in a different world, one that was full of joy and laughter, but beneath the surface, I sensed a darkness, a malevolent force that threatened to destroy everything. Elizabeth seemed to sense it too, and her smiles began to falter. As night fell, the family gathered in the parlor, playing music and laughing together. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The shadows seemed to be growing longer, the laughter more forced, and then, I saw him. The figure in shadows, standing just beyond the edge of the light. His eyes seemed to be fixed on Elizabeth, and I felt a surge of fear. "Elizabeth," I whispered, tugging on her arm. "We have to get out of here." But she just smiled and shook her head. "It's okay," she said. "Everything will be fine." As the night wore on, the music grew louder, the laughter more frantic. And then, disaster struck. A loud crash echoed through the room, and Elizabeth's eyes went wide with fear. The figure in shadows stepped forward, his eyes blazing with anger. And in that moment, I knew that everything was about to change. The figure in shadows loomed over us, his presence filling the room with an unspeakable malevolence. Elizabeth's eyes were fixed on him, her face pale with fear. The music stopped, and the laughter died away, leaving an oppressive silence. "Father," Elizabeth whispered, her voice trembling. The figure didn't respond. Instead, he reached out and grasped Elizabeth's arm, his fingers closing around her like a vice. She cried out in pain as he dragged her away, the sound of her screams echoing through the mansion. That I tried to follow, but my feet felt heavy, as if rooted to the spot. The family seemed to be in a state of shock, unable to move or speak. I was the only one who seemed to realize what was happening. With a surge of adrenaline, I broke free from my paralysis and ran after Elizabeth and her father. I followed them through the winding corridors, the sound of her screams growing fainter with every step. Finally, I saw them disappear into a door at the end of the hall. I burst through the door, and found myself in a dark, damp room. Elizabeth was lying on the floor, her father standing over her, his eyes blazing with anger. "Let her go!" I shouted, but my voice was drowned out by the sound of Elizabeth's screams. Her father turned to me, his face twisted with rage. And in that moment, I saw something that made my blood run cold. His eyes were black as coal, and they seemed to bore into my very soul. Elizabeth's screams stopped abruptly, and she lay still on the floor. Her father turned back to her, his expression changing from anger to concern. He knelt down beside her, feeling for a pulse. As I watched in horror, Elizabeth's eyes flickered open. She looked up at her father, and then her gaze shifted to me. For a moment, our eyes locked, and I saw a deep sadness and longing, and then, everything went black. When I came to, I was lying in my car, parked in front of the mansion. The sun was rising, casting a golden glow over the deserted landscape. I sat up, rubbing my head, trying to remember what had happened. Had it all been a dream? But as I looked up at the mansion, I saw Elizabeth standing in the window, her eyes fixed on me. She mouthed a single word: "Run." I didn't hesitate. I started the car and peeled out of there, the tires screeching as I hit the road. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and Elizabeth was still standing in the window, her eyes fixed on me. As I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I kept looking in the rearview mirror, expecting to see Elizabeth's father or some other figure lurking in the shadows. But there was no one. Finally, I saw a sign for a nearby town and followed the road into the center of town. I pulled into a gas station and got out, stretching my legs and trying to clear my head. As I filled up my tank, I noticed an old man sitting on a bench outside the station, watching me. He was dressed in worn overalls and had a kind face. "You look like you've been through a lot," he said, nodding at me. "What brings you to these parts?" I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. But something about the old man's kind face put me at ease, and I told him the whole story, about the mansion, Elizabeth, and her father. The old man listened intently, his expression growing more and more serious. When I finished, he nodded thoughtfully. "You've stumbled into something dark," he said. "That mansion has a reputation. People say it's cursed." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean?" The old man leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "There's a legend about a family that used to live there. They were wealthy and influential, but they made a pact with a dark force to keep their power. It consumed them, body and soul." I felt a shiver run down my spine. "What happened to them?" The old man's eyes seemed to shake off the feeling, telling myself it was just my imagination. But as I drove away from the gas station, I couldn't shake the sense that I was being pulled back to the mansion. I felt a strange connection to Elizabeth, and I couldn't help but wonder what had happened to her after I left. As I drove, the scenery around me began to blur, and I found myself turning down the road that led back to the mansion. I didn't remember making the decision to turn, but somehow, my body seemed to know the way. When I arrived at the mansion, I saw that the front door was open. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should go inside. But something seemed to be drawing me in, and I stepped out of the car and walked towards the door. As I entered the mansion, I called out for Elizabeth. My voice echoed through the empty halls, but there was no response. I walked through the rooms, searching for any sign of her, but they were all empty. Finally, I came to the room where I had seen Elizabeth's father. The door was open, and I stepped inside. Elizabeth was standing in front of the window, staring out at the landscape. She turned to me as I entered, and I saw that her eyes were filled with tears. "I knew you'd come back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I walked towards her, feeling a sense of trepidation. "What's going on, Elizabeth?" I asked. "What's happening to you?" Elizabeth's eyes seemed to cloud over, and she looked away from me. "I'm trapped," she said. "I've been trapped here for so long. And I don't know how to escape." I felt a surge of sympathy for her, and I reached out to take her hand. As our skin touched, I felt a jolt of electricity, and suddenly, I was flooded with visions of the past. I saw Elizabeth's family, happy and carefree. I saw them making a pact with a dark force, and I saw the consequences of that pact. I saw Elizabeth's father, consumed by darkness and madness. And I saw Elizabeth, trapped in the mansion, reliving the same moments over and over. The visions faded, and I looked at Elizabeth, my eyes wide with understanding. "We have to get you out of here," I said. "We have to break the curse." Elizabeth's eyes filled with hope, and she nodded. "I know," she said. "But I'm not sure if it's possible." I held Elizabeth's hand, and together, we began to search for a way to break the curse. We scoured the mansion, looking for any clues or hints that might lead us to freedom. As we searched, I realized that the curse was more complex than I had initially thought. That we found old diaries and letters, written by Elizabeth's ancestors, that hinted at the dark pact they had made. We discovered hidden rooms and secret passages, each one revealing more about the family's dark history. As we delved deeper into the mystery, I began to understand the true nature of the curse. It wasn't just a simple spell or hex. It was a complex web of dark magic that had been woven over generations. Elizabeth and I worked tirelessly, using every ounce of knowledge and ingenuity we possessed to unravel the curse. We performed rituals and incantations, hoping to weaken the curse's hold on the mansion. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we found the key to breaking the curse. It was an ancient artifact, hidden deep within the mansion's walls. We retrieved it, and with trembling hands, Elizabeth held it up, her eyes shining with determination. As she spoke the words of the incantation, the artifact began to glow. The curse's hold on the mansion began to weaken, and I felt a surge of hope. Elizabeth's eyes locked onto mine, and together, we watched as the darkness receded. The mansion began to transform before our eyes. The shadows retreated, and the air grew lighter. Elizabeth's face transformed, her eyes brightening with joy. With a final burst of energy, the curse was broken. The mansion was free, and Elizabeth was finally able to rest. As the darkness dissipated, Elizabeth turned to me, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, and with that, she vanished. The mansion was silent, its secrets finally laid to rest. I stood alone, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. I turned to leave, but as I reached the door, I heard a faint whisper. "Goodbye." I smiled, knowing that Elizabeth was finally free. I walked out of the mansion, into the bright sunlight, feeling a sense of closure and new beginnings. The car was still parked outside, waiting for me. I got in, started the engine, and drove away from the mansion, leaving its dark history behind. As I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw the mansion receding into the distance, its secrets buried forever. I drove off into the sunrise, feeling a sense of hope and renewal.